The sound of expensive heels clicking across my marble floor echoes through the villa like gunshots. I'm standing in the foyer of my $1.2 million home in Scottsdale, watching my son Trevor pace back and forth like a caged animal who just realized the cage door was never actually locked. His wife Brittany sits on my Italian leather sofa, scrolling through real estate apps on her phone, already mentally redecorating MY home with MY money. They have no idea I heard their conversation last week. They have no idea what's coming. Dad, we need to talk about your situation, Trevor says, using that same condescending tone he perfected 5 years ago when I was sleeping in my truck. The same tone he used when he told his college friends I was an embarrassment to the family name. Funny how quickly that tune changes when you discover your failure. A father just became worth 8 figures. Before I dive into this story of ultimate family betrayal and the revenge that followed, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state, your country. I want to know how far this story travels, because what you're about to hear happens in families everywhere. And if you've ever felt dismissed by your own children, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age or circumstances, hit that subscribe button for Revenge Extraordinary right now, because what you're about to hear will make you believe that it's never too late to prove everyone wrong. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My name is Earl Donovan. I'm 67 years old, and 5 years ago I was broke, homeless, and considered a complete failure by my only son. Today, I own a villa worth more than Trevor makes in a decade, drive cars he can't afford, and watch him scramble for my approval like a dog begging for scraps. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a man goes from sleeping in his truck to owning an empire, and how his own son became his greatest enemy. It started when my wife Janet died of cancer 8 years ago. We thought we had good insurance. We thought we were prepared. We were wrong about everything. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer doesn't care about your insurance deductible or your retirement savings. It just takes and takes until there's nothing left but medical bills and funeral costs. I lost everything. The house Janet and I had built together over 30 years of marriage, gone to pay for treatments that bought us 6 extra months. The auto repair business I built from nothing, sold to cover the funeral expenses, our retirement savings, our emergency fund, even Janet's jewelry. All of it disappeared into the black hole of American health care. For 3 years after Janet died, I bounced between cheap motels and the front seat of my pickup truck, picking up odd jobs, trying to rebuild at an age when most men are playing golf and spoiling grandchildren. And Trevor, my successful son with his real estate career and his beautiful wife and his perfect suburban life, he was ashamed of me. I remember the first time Trevor introduced me to Brittany. This was 2 years after Janet's death, when I was still sleeping in motels and eating gas station sandwiches for dinner. Trevor had been dating this girl for 6 months, and I'd been asking to meet her. Finally, he agreed to lunch at some fancy restaurant in Scottsdale that cost more for one meal than I spent on food in a week. "This is my dad," Trevor said when I walked up to their table, and I could hear him apologizing in those 3 words. I was wearing my cleanest shirt and my only pair of decent shoes, but I still looked like what I was, a 62-year-old man who'd lost everything and was barely hanging on. Brittany was beautiful in that expensive way some women perfect. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She shook my hand with the tips of her fingers, like poverty might be contagious. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Donovan," she said. "Trevor's told me so much about you." When she asked what I did for work, Trevor jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, Dad's between opportunities right now," he said, like being broke at 62 was a lifestyle choice I'd made. He's exploring his options. Between opportunities. That's what my son called 3 years of grinding poverty and homelessness. Between opportunities. The worst part came that Christmas. Trevor and Brittany had been married 6 months by then, living in a house I couldn't afford to visit without calculating gas money. They invited me for dinner. Not because they wanted me there, but because guilt has a way of eating at you during the holidays. I showed up with gifts I'd scraped together money for. Nothing fancy, just thoughtful. For Trevor, I'd found a vintage Craftsman tool set at a pawn shop. These were the same tools he'd used learning to work on cars with me when he was 12, back when we were close, back when he looked up to his old man instead of down on him. For Brittany, I'd bought a small potted orchid from the grocery store. Janet had loved orchids, and I thought maybe sharing that piece of my wife's memory might help build a bridge with my daughter-in-law. Trevor opened his gift first, and I watched his face carefully. For just a second, I saw recognition. He remembered those Saturday mornings in the garage, the smell of motor oil and the satisfaction of fixing something with your hands. But then Brittany leaned over to look, and her expression killed whatever moment we might have had. "Well," she said with a laugh that wasn't quite cruel but wasn't kind either, "at least you know his demographic." Trevor didn't defend the gift. He didn't defend me. He just smiled that uncomfortable smile people wear when they're embarrassed by someone they're supposed to love. When Brittany opened her orchid, she looked at it like I'd handed her a weed. "How sweet," she said in a voice that meant the opposite. "I'll find somewhere to put this." I ate dinner in their dining room, surrounded by furniture that cost more than I'd made in the past 6 months, listening to them talk about their vacation plans and their investment portfolio and their 5-year plan for upgrading to a bigger house. They talked around me like I was a piece of furniture, occasionally throwing me a question about how I was doing, but never really listening to the answer. That night, I sat in my truck in a Walmart parking lot, eating leftover dinner they'd packed for me in takeout containers, and I cried for the first time since Janet's funeral. Not because of the money or the homelessness or even the loneliness. I cried because my son, the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball and change a tire and treat people with respect, was ashamed of who I was. That's when something inside me shifted. That's when the man who'd spent 3 years feeling sorry for himself finally got angry enough to do something about it. Everything changed when I met Jasper Caldwell at the truck stop diner on I-17, just outside Phoenix. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was nursing a cup of coffee I'd refilled 4 times, trying to make $2 last until I could find work for the day. The diner was mostly empty except for truckers and early shift workers, the kind of people who understood what it meant to work hard for every dollar. Then this old man walked in wearing a $3,000 suit and driving a Bentley Continental that I'd watched him park outside. He had to be pushing 80, with white hair perfectly styled and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. He sat down at the counter, ordered the $2.99 breakfast special, and started reading the newspaper like he had all the time in the world. I watched him count out exact change for his meal, 3 $1 bills, and coins for the tip. A man who could afford to buy the diner was eating the cheapest thing on the menu and paying with pocket change. After a few minutes, he noticed me staring and smiled. "You look like a man who's got questions," he said. I almost looked away, but something about his voice made me hold his gaze. "Just wondering why someone who drives a Bentley eats at truck stops," I said. He laughed. Not the polite chuckle rich people give poor people, but a real laugh that came from somewhere deep. "Same reason you're making that coffee last an hour," he said. "Because I understand the value of $1. That's how I met Jasper Caldwell, and that conversation changed the course of my life. Jasper had made his fortune in distressed real estate, buying properties that other people had given up on and turning them into gold mines. Foreclosures, fire-damaged homes, properties with structural problems that scared off conventional investors. He saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. "Earl," he said after I told him my story over 2 more cups of coffee, "young people see an old man and think over the hill. They see someone your age and assume you're done, that your best years are behind you. But here's what they don't understand. Age isn't a disadvantage in business. It's camouflage." He explained how he'd built his empire. While younger investors chased the flashy deals and competed for the obvious opportunities, Jasper focused on the properties nobody else wanted. He had the patience to wait for the right deals, the experience to spot value that others missed, and the wisdom to know that the best revenge against a world that counts you out is proving them spectacularly wrong. I need a partner, he told me as we walked out to the parking lot. Someone hungry. Someone who understands what rock bottom looks like. Someone who's got nothing to lose and everything to prove. 3 months later, Jasper offered me a real partnership. He loaned me $50,000 to buy my first property, a condemned house in Phoenix that looked like it should have been demolished years ago. The roof was caved in, the plumbing was destroyed, and the previous owner had abandoned it after a kitchen fire gutted half the interior. Everyone else who looked at that house saw a disaster. I saw opportunity. I spent 3 months working on that house with my own hands. 16-hour days, 7 days a week, learning skills I'd never needed when I owned an auto shop, drywall, electrical work, plumbing, flooring. I taught myself everything through YouTube videos and trial and error, and my hands were raw and bleeding most days. My back ached from hunching over tools. I was 64 years old, sleeping in that house as I worked on it, because I couldn't afford both materials and a motel room. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. I felt useful. When I finished, that house was beautiful. Not fancy, but solid and clean, and something the family could be proud to call home. I listed it for sale on a Thursday, and by Saturday morning, I had 3 offers above asking price. The final sale price was $80,000. After paying back Jasper's loan and cover materials, I walked away with $30,000 profit, more money than I'd seen in one place since before Janet got sick. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was standing in that empty house on closing day, holding the check in my hands, and knowing that I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. That first house led to a second, then a third. Jasper taught me to think like a chess player, not just about the current move, but about the next 10 moves. We started small, flipping damaged houses in working-class neighborhoods. Then we moved up to commercial properties, apartment buildings, even a small shopping center that everyone said would never be profitable again. What Trevor didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been quietly building an empire for 4 years. I kept living modestly, driving my old truck, wearing the same clothes. But underneath that humble exterior, I was becoming wealthy. Not just comfortable, wealthy. Every month, I transferred money into investment accounts, real estate partnerships, and business ventures that Jasper introduced me to. I bought properties under LLC names that couldn't be traced back to Earl Donovan. I built a network of contractors, real estate agents, and attorneys who respected my business acumen and treated me like the successful investor I'd become. And through it all, Trevor had no idea. To him, I was still the same broke old man who'd embarrassed him at Christmas dinner. Still the father he was ashamed to introduce to his friends. That changed last month when I bought the villa. The property had been on the market for 18 months. A tech entrepreneur had built it during the boom, then lost everything in a cryptocurrency crash. The bank was desperate to unload it, and I was ready to stop hiding my success. I paid $1.2 million cash, no financing, no contingencies. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, and a 3-car garage currently housing a Tesla, a BMW, and a restored 1967 Mustang that cost more than Trevor's annual salary. The backyard had a pool, a spa, and mountain views that stretched to the horizon. For the first time in 5 years, I had a home worthy of the man I'd become. That's when Trevor started paying attention. I was installing new security cameras around the property, partly for security, but mostly because I wanted records of everything that happened on my land. As I was positioning the camera that covered the front gate, I noticed something in the footage from the previous week. A black BMW had driven slowly past my house 5 different times over 3 days. On the 4th pass, the driver had stopped and taken pictures. On the 5th pass, a woman in the passenger seat had also been taking photos. The license plate was registered to Trevor Donovan. My own son had been stalking me, studying my house, researching my new lifestyle like he was planning a heist. That's when I decided to find out exactly what Trevor was thinking. So I invited him over for dinner. "Dad, this place is incredible," Trevor said as I gave him the full tour. His voice carried that same false enthusiasm he'd use when pretending to appreciate my Christmas gifts. "You've really made something of yourself. For years too late, son. For years too late." Brittany was less subtle about her interest. She walked through each room like she was already redecorating, asking questions about square footage and property taxes, and whether the furniture was included in the... She caught herself before finishing that sentence, but I knew what she was thinking. Whether the furniture was included in the inheritance. During dinner, I played the role of the lonely old man perfectly. I mentioned how quiet the house felt, how overwhelming it was to manage such a large property by myself. I talked about feeling my age, wondering about the future, thinking about legacy planning. "Dad," Trevor said, leaning forward with concern that might have been genuine if I didn't know better, "have you thought about updating your will? With assets like this, you really need proper estate planning." There it was, less than 2 hours in my home, and Trevor was already thinking about my death. "You know," I said, "play my part. I probably should talk to someone about that. Maybe you could help me find the right attorney." The look that passed between Trevor and Brittany was subtle, but I caught it. The look of two people who just realized their retirement plan had walked through the door wearing my face. After they left, I sat in my home office and made a decision. I needed to know exactly what my son was planning. So I did what any smart businessman does when he needs information. I hired professionals to get it. The private investigator I hired was a former FBI agent named Linda Chun. She specialized in family financial crimes and had seen every variation of inheritance fraud and elder abuse that existed. I hired her to do complete background checks on Trevor and Brittany, focusing on their finances, their relationships, and their recent activities. What she discovered was beautiful in its irony. My successful son was drowning in debt. The house they lived in was mortgaged to 110% of its value. Trevor owed $47,000 in credit card debt across 8 different cards. Brittany had another $31,000 in personal debt, mostly from shopping and spa treatments. They borrowed against Trevor's 401k twice in the past year. Their combined annual income was $87,000. Their annual expenses were $134,000. The successful son who had been too busy to help his homeless father was himself headed for bankruptcy within 6 months. But the financial information was just the beginning. Linda also uncovered Trevor's social media history, including posts I'd never seen, because he'd blocked me from viewing them. During the worst of my homeless period, Trevor had been posting on Facebook about his family challenges. He told his friends and colleagues that he was helping his father through a difficult transition. He posted articles about adult children caring for aging parents, positioning himself as a devoted son managing a difficult situation. He was taking credit for helping me while I was eating gas station sandwiches and sleeping in my truck. The worst discovery came when Linda found photos from Trevor and Brittany's vow renewal ceremony 2 years ago. I'd never heard about this event, never been invited, never even known it happened. But there were 150 guests celebrating their love, while Trevor's father was homeless, and not one of them knew I existed. Trevor had systematically erased me from his life, while simultaneously using my struggles as a way to gain sympathy and admiration from his social circle. That night, I sat in my villa, looking out at the mountain views and the pool lights reflecting off the water, and I made a decision that would change everything. It was time for Trevor to learn what his father was really capable of. I started with my attorney, Helen Fitzgerald. She was a 45-year-old estate planning specialist who'd built her reputation defending elderly clients against financial exploitation by family members. When I showed her Linda's investigation and played the recordings from my security system, her expression went from professional interest to controlled anger. "Earl," she said, "your son isn't just positioning for an inheritance. This is textbook elder financial abuse. He's building a case to have you declared incompetent, so he can gain control of your assets while you're still alive. That was exactly what I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed by a legal expert made it real. Helen and I spent the next 3 hours completely restructuring my estate. Instead of Trevor inheriting everything, I established a complex trust structure that would protect my assets and ensure they went where I wanted them to go. Trevor would inherit exactly $1. Not out of cruelty, but as a legal acknowledgement that he was my son, while making it impossible for him to claim he'd been forgotten or overlooked. Next, I transferred all my real estate holdings into a limited liability company with Jasper as co-owner. This meant that even if Trevor somehow gained power of attorney over my personal assets, he couldn't touch the business that generated most of my wealth. Finally, I revised my will to establish the Trevor Donovan Foundation, a charitable organization that would help older adults who'd lost everything and needed a second chance. Every dollar Trevor thought he was inheriting would instead go to helping people like the man I used to be. But legal protection was just the beginning. I wanted Trevor to understand the full scope of what he'd lost, and I wanted him to face consequences for the way he treated me. That's when I started my own investigation into Trevor's business. Trevor worked for a commercial real estate firm in Scottsdale, handling property sales and leasing for retail and office clients. It was a relationship-based business where reputation and trust were everything. I decided to have some conversations with people in that business, people who knew my name and respected what I'd built. I reached out to 5 of my biggest clients, people who owned shopping centers and office buildings throughout Phoenix. I didn't ask them to sabotage Trevor's business. I just shared some information about his character, the way he'd treated his homeless father, the lies he'd told about helping me, the photos from the wedding I wasn't invited to. I let them draw their own conclusions about whether Trevor Donovan was the kind of person they wanted representing their interests. Within 2 weeks, 3 of Trevor's biggest deals had fallen through, not because of any direct action I'd taken, but because clients had decided they wanted to work with people they could trust. At the same time, I made another strategic move. Through one of my business connections, I learned that Trevor and Brittany's mortgage was being sold by their current bank to a private investment group. I made sure that investment group was one of my LLCs. Suddenly, instead of owing money to a faceless corporation, Trevor and Brittany owed everything to the father they planned to exploit. I owned their mortgage, their car loans, and through strategic purchases of debt portfolios, most of their credit card debt as well. Every monthly payment they made was coming directly to me. But I wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, Trevor called me for the first time in 6 months. His voice was tight with stress, and I could hear the panic he was trying to hide. "Dad, I don't know what's happening, but my business is falling apart. I've lost 3 major clients this month, and I can't figure out why. I'm really struggling here. I hate to ask, but I need help." 5 years too late, my son was finally asking for help. But this time, I was the one who was too busy. "Trevor," I said, letting concern color my voice, "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles. Unfortunately, I'm dealing with some business challenges of my own right now. Maybe we can talk next month when things settle down." It was the same excuse he'd given me dozens of times when I was homeless and desperate. The following week, Trevor and Brittany showed up at my villa unannounced. No call ahead, no request for permission. They just drove through my gate like they owned the place and knocked on my door with the entitlement of people who'd never learned to ask for things they wanted. I let them in and served coffee in my formal living room, watching them take in the wealth that surrounded them. Brittany's eyes moved from the artwork on the walls to the Persian rugs under our feet, calculating value with the intensity of an appraiser. "Dad," Trevor began, "Brittany and I have been talking, and we're worried about you living alone in this big house. At your age, anything could happen. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency?" I sipped my coffee and waited for him to continue. "We think it might be time to consider assisted living," Brittany added. "There are some beautiful facilities in Scottsdale, communities where you'd have people your own age, activities, medical care on site. And what would happen to this house? I asked. Trevor and Brittany exchanged a look. Well, Trevor said, the smart thing would be to sell it. Use the money to pay for your care, and whatever's left could be set aside for your future needs. Of course, Brittany added quickly. We'd help manage everything. Take care of the sale, handle the finances, make sure you get the best possible care. They wanted to sell my house, control my money, and warehouse me in some facility where I'd be out of their way. It was exactly what Linda's investigation had predicted, but hearing them say it out loud still hit like a physical blow. That's very thoughtful of you both, I said. Let me think about it. After they left, I sat in my home office and pulled out the folder Linda had prepared. It contained everything. Trevor's debt, his business failures, his social media lies, his wedding photos, his mortgage information, his credit reports. It was time to end this game. I called Trevor the next morning and invited him and Brittany back for dinner. I've been thinking about what you said. I told him, you're right that I need help managing everything. Maybe it's time to bring family into the business. Trevor's relief was audible through the phone. Dad, that's great. We can discuss all the options when we see you. That evening, they arrived dressed like they were attending a business meeting. Trevor carried a leather portfolio, and Brittany had her tablet ready to take notes. They thought they were coming to plan my surrender. Instead, they were walking into an ambush. I served dinner first. Steaks from the grill, wine from my collection, dessert from the bakery Brittany liked. I wanted them relaxed, confident, certain of their victory. After dinner, we moved to my office. Trevor opened his portfolio and spread documents across my desk, power of attorney forms, updated with templates, property transfer papers, even brochures for assisted living facilities. Dad, Trevor said, I consulted with an attorney who specializes in family wealth management. These documents would streamline everything, give us the legal authority to help you make the best decisions for your future. I picked up each document and read through it carefully, taking my time. Trevor and Brittany watched nervously as I examined every page, every signature line, every legal clause that would give them control over everything I had built. These are very thorough, I said finally, very well prepared. There's just one problem. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out my phone. Before I sign anything, I think you should hear something. I pressed play on the recording from their last visit. Their voices filled the room with crystal clarity. At your age, anything could happen. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency? There are some beautiful facilities in Scottsdale, communities where you'd have people your own age. The smart thing would be to sell it. Use the money to pay for your care. We'd help manage everything. Take care of the sale, handle the finances. Trevor's face went white. Brittany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You want to know what could happen at my age? I said, standing up and walking to my safe. I could discover that my successful son owes $78,000 in personal debt. I could learn that he's been telling people he was helping his homeless father while blocking me from his social media. I could find out about the wedding I wasn't invited to, the lies he's been telling, the bankruptcy he's heading toward. I pulled out Linda's investigation files and spread them across the desk next to Trevor's documents. I could also discover that the son who was too busy to help me when I was sleeping in my truck suddenly becomes very interested in my welfare when he finds out I'm worth $8 million. The number hung in the air between us. $8 million. More money than Trevor would make in his entire career, and all of it was mine. How did you? Trevor started, then stopped. How did I go from homeless to millionaire without you knowing? I smiled. The same way you went from successful son to bankrupt failure, without me knowing, by keeping secrets. Brittany found her voice first. This is insane. We're trying to help you, and you're treating us like criminals. Are you? I asked, are you trying to help me? Because Linda Chun, the private investigator I hired, seems to think you're trying to rob me. I showed them the photos of Trevor driving past my house, the social media posts where he lied about helping me, the financial records showing their desperate situation. Here's what's really happening. I continued. You found out your homeless father isn't homeless anymore. You realize the man you were ashamed of is now richer than you'll ever be. And instead of apologizing for the way you treated me, instead of asking for forgiveness, you decided to steal what I built. Trevor stood up, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You're my father. I'm your only family. Who else are you going to leave it to? That's a great question, I said. Let me show you. I pulled out the final document from my safe, my new will. Everything I own is going to the Trevor Donovan Foundation. It's a charity I'm establishing to help older adults who've lost everything and need a second chance. People like me 5 years ago. You're naming it after me? Trevor asked, confusion replacing anger. I'm naming it after the son I thought I raised. I said, the son who would have helped his father instead of being ashamed of him. The son who would have invited his father to his wedding instead of hiding him like a dirty secret. The son who has shown respect instead of planning theft. Brittany started crying. We have children to think about. We have responsibilities. You can't just throw away your family because of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I looked at her with the same expression she'd given my Christmas orchid 5 years ago. Is that what you call abandoning your homeless father-in-law while taking credit for helping him? I walked to the door and opened it. I think we're done here. Trevor grabbed the documents from my desk. His documents, his plans for my future. This isn't over, Dad. You can't cut me out. I'm your son. You're right, I said. You are my son. That's why you'll inherit exactly $1. So no one can ever say, I forgot you. After they left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stood on my back patio, looking out at the mountains. The pool lights reflected off the water, and the desert air was warm and clean. For the first time in 8 years, I felt completely at peace. The next morning, I called a press conference. Local media, business reporters, even some of the investors I'd worked with over the past 4 years. I announced the establishment of the Trevor Donovan Foundation, dedicated to helping older adults rebuild their lives after financial devastation. 5 years ago, I told the cameras, I was homeless, sleeping in my truck, eating gas station sandwiches for dinner. Today, I'm worth $8 million. I want to help other people make that same journey from despair to success. The story made the front page of the business section and led the local news at night. Earl Donovan, the homeless man who became a real estate mogul, giving away his entire fortune to help others. Trevor's reaction was swift and predictable. He hired an attorney and tried to contest my competency, claiming I was making irrational decisions under the influence of unscrupulous advisors. The lawsuit lasted exactly 3 weeks, until Helen presented evidence of his debt, his lies, and his recorded plans to exploit me. The judge dismissed Trevor's case and ordered him to pay my legal fees. Within 6 months, Trevor and Brittany were divorcing. She couldn't handle being married to a man who'd lost his inheritance and his reputation in the same year. Trevor lost his job when his employer learned about his failed lawsuit against his own father. Today, Trevor lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in Mesa, working retail at a furniture store, learning what real poverty feels like. He calls me sometimes, late at night when he's been drinking, leaving voicemails that alternate between apologies and accusations. I don't return his calls. Brittany remarried within a year, a wealthy orthopedic surgeon who could provide the lifestyle she'd expected from Trevor. She sends me Christmas cards now, signed with love and respect, as if we were always close. I throw them away without reading them. The Trevor Donovan Foundation has helped 127 people in its first 2 years. Men and women who lost everything to medical bills, divorce, business failures, or simple bad luck. We provide microloan for business ventures, funding for job training, and emergency assistance for housing and transportation. Every month, I meet with the people we're helping. I listen to their stories share advice from my own experience, and remind them that failure isn't final unless you decide it is. Last month, a 58-year-old woman named Margaret came to see me. She'd lost her house to medical debt after her husband's heart attack and was living in her car. Her adult daughter had told her she was too proud to accept help and should just accept that her best years were behind her. I gave Margaret a loan to start a catering business. Today, she's serving corporate events and saving money for an apartment. Her daughter still thinks she's crazy for trying to rebuild at her age. Some people never learn. As I finish this story, I'm sitting in my home office, looking out at the pool where I swim every morning. The Tesla is charged in the garage, ready for my meeting with potential investors tomorrow. The foundation has enough funding to operate for the next 50 years, helping people rebuild their lives long after I'm gone. Trevor will inherit his dollar. Brittany will keep sending Christmas cards. And I'll keep living the life I built from nothing, surrounded by people who respect what I've accomplished instead of people who take it for granted. If there's one thing I learned from this experience, it's that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. My son thought he could wait for me to die and inherit what I'd built. Instead, he learned that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And some lessons come too expensive to be worth learning. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you believe that revenge served cold is the most satisfying kind, then you need to subscribe to Revenge Extraordinary right now. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and get ready for more stories that prove it's never too late to show the world who you really are. And if you don't subscribe, well, that's okay too. Just remember, every time you skip that subscribe button, you're missing out on stories that could change your perspective on justice, family, and the power of never giving up. Don't be like Trevor, walking away from something valuable until it's too late to claim it. The choice is yours, but choose wisely.